that need to be done, it creates an execution pack, which constrains it to be executing things in a specific way, right? Execution pack is kind of like, there's no template for that because different projects constitute different ways of execution. So you have your, that's called a rehydration pack. At the end of the day, it makes the rehydration pack, and it knows how to make all this stuff because all these things are defined in the governance OS. It defines what an execution pack is, what a rehydration pack is, what's inside a rehydration pack, which is the execution pack, the continuity lock, the bootstrap prompt, and it defines what buffs are. So buffs are in a separate folder because those are rarely touched, right? When it makes the entire system, it generates you back out the updated version of the zip and the end of day snapshot, I'm sorry, in the data folder. So now you have all your documents from like the bootstrap prompts and everything, rehydration pack, the end of day snapshots, the guild orders, the codex, all that stuff in your data folder. Then you have your actual engine folder too, that did all the work inside, which is your actual repo. So it generates that as a new canon. The next day, you can open up a new chat. You can drop that zip back in. It'll review everything again. First, you drop in the Synapse OS, like the Synapse Governance OS. It locks in the Synapse protocols, and then it asks you for what subject you're working on, and it'll take the data folder and the engine folder, which are one zip you drop in. It reviews everything that was done from the last day or so or more, and then it can then review the engine and what state it's at, and then where you left off from, right? And then knows that the continuity, the rehydration pack is like highly important. So it takes big priority. So it reviews that, locks into the same state it was in before. And because it has yesterday's control sync, it reads that first, and then it reads the end of day snapshot to know what the scope was, where things were going, and what they talked about from the day before. And then it shows the end of day snapshot of everything that was done. So then if there was any bugs from the end of day snapshot or anything like that, or anything changes that need to be made, or quests that were dropped, or why, or anything like that, those are brought up at the next day's control sync. So you drop all these things in, these zips, it opens up at beginning of the day a new control sync, which is the meeting, and you talk now. You talk about where things were left off, what it can do, what's going on now, if there's any bugs, what happened yesterday, you discuss everything. If there is some big bugs that need to be fixed and worked out, they're out, or any changes you want to make that are outside the scope of the guild orders. And then what you do is you make what's called, it creates a side quest. When it creates a side quest, that is a quest that is outside the guild orders, wasn't in the original scope, but is used for like maybe adding a little feature, changing something. Maybe it made like a telegram door, but it wasn't quite exactly how you wanted those buttons to be or something, right? So you then have it change something. That's a new side quest. Throws that in there. The quests are all rated on like priority and risk factor and stuff too. There's all that as well. But when it reviews the yesterday's stuff and you talk at your control sync and you decide everything, maybe you make a couple new side quests, and then maybe you leave those on the board or you accept them, right? Depending on what they're solving. So then you end the control sync. It generates a new updated canonical zip again for both the engine and the data folder with the closed off control sync snapshot in there. And then it treats that as canon, and it starts executing now the next accepted quests by the same procedure that it did yesterday. So it starts building your system more, and every single time it executes a quest, it gives you a new canonical zip file. Once it's done those ones, then it does the same thing where it generates an end-of-day snapshot, everything that I said that it puts in there, and then it'll update the continuity if it needs to update. Usually within one dungeon, it doesn't need to really update the rehydration pack, but usually at the end of a dungeon, it needs to update a rehydration pack. So if you're done the dungeon, it'll re-update the rehydration pack, and then it will... the next day, you'll be able to tell it at the control sync which new quests you want to accept, which dungeon you want to do. So this just keeps repeating until you get to the end when the guild orders are complete. Once the guild orders are complete and you got your repo and you got your version 1, now you have something that you can actually use. You have your program and you can test it out and be like, wow, this is really cool. And then you can either choose to make guild orders now that refine and polish the version 1 that you're doing, or you can just have it continue on into the next step or the next phase according to your codex, right? There's another feature that we're going to include beyond the codex, because the codex tells the laws and the principles and everything about your idea end to end, but it doesn't tell how to make those things reality. So it might say that Ash, like your Stewart does this and it does that and it does diarization and stuff like that, but it doesn't say how. So it doesn't say like you might have to decide, like, do you want to use fast whisper or just whisper or whatever for the transcript mode. So a build manual is when it takes the entire codex, reviews it in full, and then creates what's called a build manual, which is something that a very high competent engineer or an AI can execute the entire build manual and knows every single tiny little thing to build that project that's in the codex. It'll build the build manual the same way that it does the codex, where it takes the codex, it reviews it in full, groks the entire thing end to end, and then it creates a table of contents based on that information for a build order, a build manual, and it makes all the sections and subsections. It could be like, you know, more than 100 long or so. I have one that's like 200 subsections together. And then it starts to generate each subsection one by one by following a specific auditing way it does stuff, and reference laws and stuff that it does that constrains it in a certain way. And eventually it creates the entire build manual, and if you want, you can take each section of the build manual, drop into a fresh AI, and ask it if it understands this fully, and if it can execute it, and it'll tell you. And eventually you have a build manual. So that makes it even easier, because then you don't really have to go in details of guild orders. You can just say next guild orders, generate the next guild orders, generate the next guild orders, because it knows where the system's at and what needs to be done next, right? But if you don't have that, you kind of have to discuss like where you want from the codex, what you want to create in it, and how you want to do it, right? And then it'll create the guild orders. So it keeps doing that until your system's built. And then once your system's built, you have a full system that you can that you just made, a program that you essentially thought into existence, because you talked it into existence, but it's a framework that governs the AI for people who cannot code at all, to create systems beyond like what base 44 does, where base 44 is more like, you know, you describe what you want, but it's no different than describing a picture that you want the AI to create, right? You're like, you create a picture and it's really cool. Yeah, it's kind of like what I wanted, but it's you don't have control over every single little detail, right? Or every pixel. When you create when you paint a picture yourself, you have full control, right? But not all of us are artists. So if you're with an artist and you're telling them bit by bit what you wanted, that's essentially what we're doing here, right? And you are the programmer. You can change every little thing. When you want a web app UI, you can upload a photo of the kind of web app UI that you want. Say you want it to look kind of like how ChatGPT's web UI looks. Take a screenshot of that, load it in, and now it can create guild orders and stuff for the web app part for quests based on what that picture looks like, right? So it creates, and you can edit every little thing. Oh, I want this to change a tiny bit. I want that to change a tiny bit. Okay, those are side quests that it starts doing, right? And it does real code, bit by bit, like a real programmer. So you have full control, and you're working with the AI, and you're pretty much thinking ideas into existence, like brainstorming. You just have structured ideas, and it creates them.